Capital Hoops. Today we are with a coaching legend. It's a pleasure to be with you, Coach McAdams. We're continuing our series Beyond the X's and O's, and we are very excited to talk to you today.
Well, hey, I'm equally excited. I admire your work. You have been a regular contributor to my show, In and Out of Sports, and you are simply the best in the business.
We'll touch a little bit more about that show in a little bit.
Absolutely.
But first off, I want to get a background for those of our viewers who aren't familiar with you and your work. I know you coached at Maret for 29 years.
Yes.
A couple of years at Mackin, your alma mater before that. But just sum up your career prior to coaching. Were you a basketball player?
You know what? I grew up with a father and an older brother, and they were tremendous sports fans. So at a very young age, I would be in the living room or the dining room while they're watching a game, and I'm playing. And I would hear the names and I would hear the action, but wasn't old enough to know what was going on. By the time I reached 7 years old, then I became a sports fanatic and would go to the games, would read the newspapers, etc. I love sports. Matter of fact, it's a running joke to this day. I attended St. Augustine's Elementary School, and I had a good deal with my mom that if I kept a certain grade point average and stayed out of trouble, that 2 days I could stay away from school. And those 2 days were the opening day of regular baseball season and the opening day of the World Series. And it was a running joke. When sister would call the roll and would get to my name, and she would say, Mr. McAdams, Mr. McAdams, and someone would yell, World Series, and she said, that's right, the World Series starts today. So, you know, I say all that, and I love sports. I've always loved sports. I played sports. I was a very skilled player, but not great physically. I was a chubby kid growing up. But I was so committed to the extent of one summer between my 16th and 17th birthday, in 3 months I lost 55 pounds just to play basketball.
When did basketball become your sport of choice? I know you like all sports.
I love all sports.
But at some point basketball had to rise to the top since you made a career out of it.
Right, because basketball in my neighborhood, there were just so many older guys who were 2, 3, 4 years ahead of me that were just great players. I lived in the shadow of Cardozo High School, and in the 50s and 60s, there were no finer high school program, public school program in this area than Cardozo. They had players like Aaron Webster, Bo Scott, Rip Scott, Billy Gaskins, Ed Epps, Lynn Ring, just to name a few, and then Western. A lot of the players that would come to St. Augustine's and attended St. Augustine's played at Western as well. Larry Watson, Lamar McCoy. These were all Met players, all league players, and they were a tremendous influence on me.
So tell me how you landed at Maret. You were there for 29 years.
Yes,
I know you were at Mackin for 2 years prior to that.
Well, I started coaching basketball. My church, St. Augustine's. Again, I attended St. Augustine's School. And a very young priest at the time, Father Raymond B. Kemp, Father Raymond Baker Kemp. And Father Kemp, his mission was to revitalize a parish that was once thriving and vibrant, but the majority of its parishioners had become old. And so he wanted to implement some programs to bring new people, younger people, and the first thing he did, he wanted to have good basketball. And so he approached me about coaching, and I said, no, I don't want to coach. I'm not a coach. But he was persistent, and he had my friends approach me. So then I said, look, I'm going to do it just to get you off my back. I'm going to do it for 1 year, and then that's it. I'm done. Don't ask me again. Well, I started it, and it was the greatest thing.
How old were you at the time?
At the time, I was 19 years old. Okay. And so I was coaching players who were 14 and 15. But it was a great thing. I enjoyed myself so much. And he pulled me aside and said, see, I knew you're natural at this. And that's when I said, hey, I want to be a coach.
So how long after that was it until you got your first high school job?
Well, 4 years at St. Augustine's.
Okay.
And 2 of the 4 years, we won the Middle Atlantic Championship. That means that we were not just the champions of the D.C. area, but also Baltimore, Delaware, and Philadelphia. So 2 of those 4 years, we won the Middle Atlantic Championship. After the 4th year, one of my players, Bill Green, who received a full financial aid package to attend St. Albans to play sports, he contacted me and said, hey, we're looking for a JV basketball coach. Are you interested? And I said, sure. So my first high school job, I was the head junior varsity basketball coach at St. Albans and the assistant coach under the legendary John Dodd.
Okay, and then how long were you?
I was at St. Albans for 2 years,
Okay.
And then Coach Dodd said, look, I got a call the other day, and there's a little school about 3 blocks down the street from St. Albans by the name of Maret. They're looking for a coach. It's a small school, but it may be a good start for you. Are you interested? I said, yes. I called, I set up an interview, and I was mesmerized by the head of that school, Peter Sturdivant, one of the most incredible individuals I have ever met. We spent over 2 hours in the interview process, and only 30 minutes we discussed the job. It was about life, it was about DC, it was about young people, and after leaving that, I said, this is where I want to be.
So you were there for 29 years.
29.
Obviously, you have a ton of memories.
Oh gosh, all good.
I need your
good.
top couple memories of the time you spent coaching at Maret.
Okay, not necessarily in any order, but 1999, when I had a very good team led by Tony Dobbins, and we had an opportunity to play against Tamir Goodman. Tamir Goodman at that time was called the Jewish Jordan, and he was just a great high school player, and because he was a rarity, meaning he was an Orthodox Jew who played the game of basketball and played it exceptionally well, he played to great crowds. It was sellouts all over Baltimore. And someone made a call and said, we want him to come to DC, and it would be a great game and a great matchup with Tamir versus Tony. Again, are you interested? I went to my athletic director, Liz Hall, and I said, can we do this? She said, absolutely. And so that's one of my memories, playing at American University, standing room only, people standing outside of the gymnasium an hour and a half before tip-off. Also that week, fielding calls in the athletic office from Sports Illustrated, ESPN, all of the major national sports outlets and local covered that game. You were probably covering the game as well.
That was a little before my time covering, but I was in high school at the time. Tamir Goodman was around, and he was just this mythical legend.
He was.
Tell us more about the legend of Tamir Goodman. Obviously, the Jewish Jordan. I know at one point he had signed with Maryland, but then ended up.
Yes.
Tell us.
Well, first of all, I thought it was unfair to put that type of pressure on any student athlete. Tamir Goodman was a very, very good basketball player. He had tremendous range, he could handle the ball, and he had great vision.
How about his athleticism?
Very good athlete. Very good athlete. He was about 6'3", he was quick, he was long. I tell you what, his game, and nowhere near was he as good as this guy, because who basically is, but his game was very similar to a Steph Curry, where he could create his own shot, he had tremendous range, and he hit all his free throws. So he was a tremendous player, but very few players short of LeBron James and Kobe Bryant, Kevin Garnett, the people who were in high school could have lived up to that type of publicity.
Yeah. So give me some more Maret memories.
Okay, another Maret memory. We were playing one of our top rivals, Flint Hill, and we were down 3. with 10 seconds to go with the basketball. I called timeout. I gathered the kids, and I told them, I said, look, we're going to score. I set the play up, and I said, there's no doubt Tony's going to hit the shot. My main concern is after he hits the shot, hustle back to play defense because the game isn't over. They had a very quick guard, Brian Woodson, who could get the ball from the length of the court in a short period of time. We set the play up. Thank God it worked perfectly. Tony got a clear look from the three-point arc in the corner. He nailed it, and just like as I predicted, they got a last shot off. Fortunately, it didn't go in. But that was another moment where I pretty much, called it. And then finally, back in 1982, and this was 82, was like my 4th or 5th year there. And we finally had a really good competitive team, a team that could compete against just about any program in the area. And that February night, it was the President's Day, I recall, in February, Monday morning. I had a heads up that we would be in the top 20. I couldn't sleep. I was up like at 5:30 waiting on the paper to come so I could look at the top 20 and see Maret there. So those are some of the top moments.
How did your coaching career come to an end? I'm sure it was really difficult to hang it up.
No, it wasn't. It was not, because I always was of the mindset that I did not want to coach into my 50s and certainly in my 60s. I didn't want to do that. And at the time, I figured it had ran its course, and I was involved in a second career, which we'll get to in a second. So it was an easy transition for me. Not one day have I missed coaching, not one day.
How involved are you to this day in Maret basketball? I know I see you there from most of the games I show up to, but how much is Maret basketball these days a part of your life?
A big part of my life now. I just have so much confidence and respect in the person who's running the program now, and that's Coach Drizel, Coach Chuck Drizel, who has done a great job, will continue to do a great job, and he'll take that Maret basketball program to even higher levels than yours truly.
How does Luka Garza stack up amongst the top players that you ever coached at Maret?
Oh, he's at the top of the list. He is, I would put him in the Mount Rushmore of Maret basketball players, and we've had so many players. But in terms of big men, he would be at the top of the list. James Barnes, who played at Penn State, would be there, and Anthony Carr, who played at Virginia Tech. So, we've had some great big players. Those two guys weren't as big as Luka, but I think Luka has the ability, the potential, to be an NBA player in about 3 or 4 years.
So fast forward a little bit, you stop coaching at Maret, and you have a new part of your life that you've become incredibly successful with, and a lot of people in the DMV who don't know you as the Maret coach know you as
the host of the In and Out of Sports, and I love it, and that's why I guess I've never missed coaching, because the same passion and the same enthusiasm that I had for coaching, I was able to transfer it to the radio show, meaning that when I was coaching, I had to go out and try to get some good student athletes to build a program. Well, in radio, you've got to go out and get good guests, all right? Yeah. Then after I got the athletes, then I had to have a game plan. I had to work with them on the fundamentals. Well, radio is the same way. You've got to prepare. You've got to prepare your questions. You've got to prepare the guest in proper order. And then for my show, I own the show per se, so then I have to go out and get the sponsorship. And so that's similar to recruiting again. So the same passion I've transferred into the radio, and I reach so many people. So many people, I have a platform for them that maybe the bigger sports stations would not have time, and I specialize in the DMV. Now, we have national stories and national people, but my specialty is what's going on in Washington, Maryland, and Virginia. And you've been a big part of that.
And how long have you been doing In and Out Sports, Coach?
This is going on my 6th year.
And in addition to In and Out Sports, you also host another radio show.
I'm the co-host.
Daily.
I am the co-host of the Larry Young Morning Show with the coach in Baltimore. And this is my 18th year co-hosting that show. And that show is a little bit of everything. We do sports, we do politics, we do what's going on nationally, internationally, and of course locally in Baltimore.
So I want to talk a little bit more about In and Out of Sports. I know every Sunday you're on from, I think it's 11 to 1?
11 to 1, yeah.
11 to 1, and you've had some amazing guests throughout the year.
Yes.
I've been privileged enough to be on your show quite a lot.
Yes.
And every time I'm on, I'm mesmerized at the different characters you have on your show. But I'm curious if you had to give me a short list of some of the most memorable interviews you've had on that show, where you would start.
Oh, gosh, now that's a tough one because we've had so many great people. John Thompson, Coach Thompson has been on twice, and always a great interview with Coach. Lefty Giselle, great interview. Morgan Wooten, great interview. In terms of athletes, Riddick Bowe was a tremendous interview. Let's see, who did I have? I had an old school football player that you may not remember, but the older sports people remember, Dwayne Thomas. Dwayne Thomas was an outstanding running back for the Dallas Cowboys, played a year or two here in Washington, but he was the guy that coined the phrase, I don't know why the Super Bowl is so super when they play it every year. And so I had him on. But it's just been a who's who. And once again, this is where I get so much excitement and enthusiasm and a challenge of, okay, I had Charlie Scott on, I've had Phil Ford on, Adrian Dantley. So next week, how can I top this? And it's like coaching. We have a great game, you celebrate, you savor the victory for a moment, and then you go back to the drawing board and say, hey, we got to prepare for the next one. How can we be better? Or if you have a bad game, or if I don't do bad shows, but some shows are great and some shows are good. If I don't do a great show, then my challenge is next week to be better.
I think one of the things additionally that you've done, and I think it's actually the way that you and I linked up, you used to do something for 980 AM. Where
Coach
you used
Thompson,
to talk with John Thompson.
for 2 years during the basketball season.
Yeah, talk about that a little more.
Oh, that was so exciting to work with Coach Thompson. He and I have had a great relationship throughout. I remember Coach when he was at St. Anthony's and then initially going to Georgetown before he became famous and a Hall of Famer. But we've always had a good communication, and it was just an honor to be his high school sports guy for 2 years. And of course, knowing Coach isn't for the weak of heart now. Yeah. So you had to be ready for a lot of different things. I would prepare maybe 5 or 6 topics, and sometimes he would just stay on one because he enjoyed it. That was great. And then I would prepare maybe 3 or 4, and one I would think would hit, and he would say, what else you got? But that was the excitement and the enjoyment working with Coach.
Coach, basketball has changed in many aspects over the past 3 decades, 4 decades, and you've been a part of the game for the vast majority of that. I'm curious where you think the state of the game is right now. I know in Maryland they just adopted a shot clock for next year, which is pretty big. Small ball seems to be big these days, but I'm curious what you think.
Well, I've never been a big fan of small ball, and so if I were coaching today, I would be a big challenger of small ball, meaning that my bus never left unless the big boys were there. And every year when we would order uniforms, the largest number we had was 55. And I would always tell my athletic director, I have to go out and find a player to fill 55. And so I believe that you win this game with good big players. And, you need a point guard. But if I were coaching today, I would send a cab or now an Uber for those small ball teams because I would post them and pound them. That's why You talk about Golden State, not taking anything away from Golden State. They are the best team right now. But don't tell me that they're the greatest team of all time. No! They wouldn't beat the Bird Celtics in a series. They would not beat the Showtime Lakers in a series. Maybe not the 76ers with Moses. Because I know Bird, Parrish, and McHale would post them and pound them. Okay? And Showtime could say, hey, you want to get up and down the floor? We'll do that. And then when they would get tired of that, they would put Kareem in there and just throw the ball in. He would skyhook, and it would be like the dinner bell, all you could eat. So I still believe that you win the game with good big players. One of my pet peeves, very few people are teaching post moves. And very few big players want to play with their back to the basket.
Yeah.
If you want to earn a scholarship and possibly get paid, and you're a big player, 6'8" or better, work on your post moves, because now you would be a rarity. And so I talked about Kevin McHale, Akeem Olajuwon, Adrian Dantley. These are people who I love because they had great footwork and tremendous moves down deep.
Give me some more thoughts on the state of the game today.
Well, the players are bigger, stronger, faster. And you have some what I would call players who transcend eras, meaning a Kevin Durant would be great in any era. I've not seen anything like him, a 7-footer with perimeter skills. Obviously, LeBron James would be great in any era, and there are a couple of more. But I don't think you have the really good teams, and I don't think that the game is played at a high competitive level versus yesteryear. AAU, I'm not painting everyone with the same brush, because I know some AAU coaches here locally that are outstanding educators, and they do a fine job. But for the most part, you don't have guys teaching. You don't have coaches teaching anymore. It's going out, recruiting the best group of players, select team, and rolling the ball out. Well, back then, when I came up, you had to pay your dues. You had to, we recruited people, but once we got them, we coached them. And we taught them, again, post moves. We taught them step slide, defense, etc. I don't see a lot of teaching now. I see more relying on athleticism than fundamentals.
Coach, what kind of advice would you give to a younger person who wanted to get into coaching?
Well, I'm going to go back to an old phrase that one of my heroes in coaching, Morgan Wooten, would say. And Coach Wooten would always say, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so the first thing that I would tell young people, men or women getting into coaching, you have to really, it's about the players. It's not about you. It's not about your ego. If you have to put the young people first, put them first, put yourself and your ego aside. And if you put them first and realize that at the high school level or lower, it's about building character. It's about molding young people more so than W's and L's.
Coach, last thing I want to ask you, and I've asked every coach in this series this, and I know I'm going to have an interesting answer from you because you've been around for so long.
Okay.
If there was a pickup basketball game today,
yes,
with every coach in the area, first I'll do present,
right,
and then I'll do past. But if there was a pickup game with all the coaches in the area, who would your first pick be to play?
Now, when you say a pickup game with all the coaches, meaning you're talking about coaches to actually play?
Correct.
Well, I'll tell you, the best player / person that I ever coached against was George Leffridge at Sidwell. George Leffridge was one of the greatest high school players ever. First team All-Met 3 years in a row. And I had an old stick, so to speak, where I would go in the locker room on a big game, and I would tell the players, you know what, guys, I wish I could trade places. I wish instead of you going out there and competing, I could play their opposing coach. We would meet at half court, and he and I would play one-on-one. That's how fired up. I never said that about Sidwell because I know I couldn't beat George one-on-one. So it would be George Lethbridge, who was just a great, great basketball player, arguably an even greater coach.
All right, Coach. We really appreciate the time. It's been great catching up with you. And we'll be listening to In and Out of Sports, and we'll see you soon.
Life is hard, but it's even harder when you're stupid. Get smart. Tune in to In and Out of Sports.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.